I'm going to start today with an overnight development that some of you may be aware of. April McLaughlin, the woman accused of hoarding dogs in abhorrent conditions in Chandler, has been rearrested. She is now facing a 24-count indictment that includes 8 felony charges and 16 Class 1 misdemeanors. And this is in addition to the 77 misdemeanors that she already faces in Chandler City Court. So I want to thank Chandler PD for their ongoing partnership in working this case and for finding and arresting Ms. McLaughlin. As always, charges are not evidence, and people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. But as you know, several weeks ago, we furthered the case to Chandler City Court to handle the misdemeanor charges, but it appeared to us that more needed to be done. And we talked to Chandler about it, as I informed you at the time, and so they have developed additional evidence that has made it possible, including veterinary evidence that gave more detail as to the severity of the injuries to these animals, that allowed us to move forward with these new charges, including the felony charges that I referenced earlier. And it is our intention in this office to hold people who would do these things accountable. Let me also remind you that another animal abuser is still at large. We have a grand jury warrant out for his arrest. It's Lester Paul Richmond. Here's his picture if you don't already have it. He is accused of intentionally subjecting an animal to cruel mistreatment, and you may remember the video associated with this case. So if anyone out there knows information about his whereabouts, please call the Scottsdale Police Department. They have a tip line set up. The number for that tip line is 480-312-TIPS, T-I-P-S, or 480-312-8477. Now if we could change the slide. I'm going to move on to a case that is on everybody's minds and everybody's hearts right now, and that is the Preston Lord case. Before I take any questions, I'm going to update you about the case involving the death of Preston Lord in Queen Creek. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions, but understand, because this is an ongoing situation, I cannot answer a lot of the questions that you're going to ask. That's not because I'm being elusive, that's because my job is to protect the integrity of cases, and that's what I'm doing. So I want to describe the process. I think there's been some misunderstanding about that. And so I've put a chart up here to explain the 2 different ways that offenses get submitted to our office for charges. Obviously there's a crime and a police investigation, and then following that, the police have the option of either making an immediate arrest and submitting the case to us, which is called an in-jail submittal, or they can submit the case to us without making an arrest. Let me explain the differences between those 2. If it comes in as an in-jail submittal, these are the timelines. After somebody is arrested, they have to receive their initial appearance within 24 hours. At the initial appearance is where the bond is set or bail amount is set. They're provided an attorney if they need one. And then we have 48 hours from that time to file charges. If we do not file charges within 48 hours, if they're in custody, they're released. If they're out on bond, the bond amount goes away. To submit a basket submittal to our case, to our office, that gives us time to review the case and decide what appropriate charges are. That is what has happened in this case. And let me explain then, once we get the case either way through the in-jail or the basket submittal, we go through a case review, a thorough case review, and then we have to take the case to a probable cause hearing before it is set for trial. To give you an idea about the complexity of this case, we now have a police report that is over 2,000 pages long. We exchange evidence with the Queen Creek Police Department through evidence.com, and we have over 2,000 pieces of evidence. That can include pictures, That could include interviews, body-worn cams, other videos. But as you can imagine, 2,000 pieces of evidence is a lot to go through. 2,000 pages of a police report is a lot to go through. Over 600 of those pieces of evidence are videos. All of those videos have to be watched by the prosecutors who are assigned. I have assigned 2 senior prosecutors from this office who are homicide prosecutors. They are experienced at what they do, and they are pouring through this evidence. But understand, to take it to the probable cause hearing, we not only have to present evidence that supports our case, but we have to present evidence that contradicts our case as well. So we have to have it right, and we have to have it right the first time. We are going to move as quickly as possible, but we are not going to let expediency take priority over doing it right. So this will take time, as you can imagine, because we all want the right outcome, and we all want to see justice for Preston. And I know that public pressure is high and people are expecting results quickly. What I would say to the public is this is not my first rodeo. I'm a 30-year prosecutor, and I know how to put a case together, and we're not going to compromise quality. But let me say this to the people out there who are the perpetrators of this crime. You should take no comfort whatsoever in the time that this is taking to put the case together. We are just lining the ducks up. You also may be aware that overnight there was an arrest made by Gilbert PD of an individual by the name of Christopher Fantastic, Fantastic. The crimes for which he was arrested are not related to the Preston Lord case, but it is an open investigation, and so for questions related to that, I would refer you to the Gilbert Police Department. So with that, I will take your questions.
Would you mind any more details on April McLaughlin and what additional evidence you found? And is there a concern that she might one day get out and do it again?
Well, the additional evidence was what I alluded to. So it includes a veterinarian looking at the evidence to comment on the severity of the injuries to the animals. She is in. We did ask for a $75,000 cash-only bond, which, as you know, would require her to post the full amount, 100%. The court set a $75,000 secured appearance bond, which will require $7,500. So obviously, we're monitoring that situation. What's that?
Sure. County Attorney Mitchell, how often did your office meet with the Queen Creek investigators as the Preston Lord case was being developed before their submittal?
You know, you pose that in the past tense, and what I would say is we met and we continue to meet and communicate with Queen Creek PD. The chief and I had a long discussion even this past Friday, so we are in constant communication with them so that we're apprised of any things that are developing as we're reviewing the case, and they're apprised of any things that we want followed up on as we're reviewing the case.
We heard prior to submittal the meetings were at least weekly. Can you confirm that?
I know that they were frequent. I can't give you the exact number, but it was as needed and regular.
As your prosecutors and the investigators are having these regular meetings discussing the case and the evidence and the suspects, how can it be that after all this time that there's still more evidence to review? Wasn't much of this reviewed before the submittal was even made?
Well, there is a difference between a police investigation and a prosecution. So the police investigation concerns whether there is probable cause to make an arrest, but my attorneys have to ensure that there is a reasonable likelihood of conviction, and that means they have to pour through the same materials that are developed by the detectives. This isn't just in this case, this is in every case that we get. We review it that way. And so that is, you know, you can go to a briefing, but until you sit down and watch interviews and you sit down and watch videos and read how the police report is written, that's when you can make the decisions you need to make.
Was MCAO aware that the submittal was coming at the time that it came in 13 days ago, or was that a surprise?
We knew that it was coming at some point. We weren't sure exactly when it was coming.
And you say you're still reviewing the evidence to see whether or not, have any of the suspects been ruled out at this point, or is it still you're going forward looking at all 7?
That would be, yeah, nobody has been ruled out at this point, and we're still looking at the entirety of the package.
We spoke to a former homicide prosecutor who worked in this office, and he says that it's clear what's happening shows that MCAO and Queen Creek Police were not on the same page. Were you not on the same page with Queen Creek Police here?
I find it fascinating that people leave this office and pretend to know what's going on in this office when they're not here anymore. In fact, I talked just yesterday with the leadership of Queen Creek. That's not true.
Has this case been technically furthered at this point?
No, it is actively being reviewed by our office.
Wanted to ask about the idea that some of the kids involved in some of this East Valley violence could be calling themselves Gilbert Goons or called Gilbert Goons in some way, and the possibility that gang charges may be brought in some of these violence cases, whether in Gilbert or Queen Creek or other places. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the possibility of gang charges, especially considering this department's history with them?
You know, I don't know where the name Gilbert Goons came from. It doesn't seem to capture the seriousness of this. These are criminal acts. And we, of course, if they are doing this through an organized street gang type situation, we will look at the enhancement of gang charges or whether it was in furtherance of a street gang. We're not at that point yet to say that we've made a decision on that. But nothing's off the table.
Turning now to the Christopher Fantastic case, your office asked for the Form 4 to be sealed in this case. Mm-hmm. Why, when it's such a high-profile case that the community has been so interested in? There
was some sensitive information in that pertaining to an ongoing investigation, and so we thought it best to seal the Form 4.
Have there been any juveniles as a result of this sent over to juvenile court or the juvenile system? I know maybe they weren't technically arrested, but referred or detained in any way.
We've received referrals on both juveniles and adults from Queen Creek.
Oh, no, I mean in the Christopher Fantastic, the assault from 8 August.
As far as I know, that's the singular arrest, but I would refer you to Gilbert PD.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. So we'll start with some questions about the Preston Lord investigation. I understand you may not be able to answer some of them, so hopefully I can kind of go down my list. Are you able to provide the ages of those recommended for charges at this point?
No, I'm not going to do that at this time.
Are any parents currently recommended for charges?
I'm not going to comment on anything related to who is being investigated. I will tell you this, that I have met with the parents of Preston Lord, and I have explained the process to them and explained, you know, while I don't have a time exact, what the timeline might look like, and let them know.
I know you can't give specifics, but is it possible in an investigation like this for parents of suspects to face charges in a case?
Anytime there is something involving a juvenile where the parent may be aware of what the juvenile is or may do, that's a possibility. And I'm speaking generally, not about this case. So, you know, we're going to look at the whole picture.
I know that you gave kind of a breakdown, a generic breakdown at the beginning. When talking about a basket submittal, in some cases we've seen that names and charges are publicly released at the time the case is submitted over to your office. Can you explain why that's not happening in this case?
Much of the time when a case is submitted to our office, you have a single actor or a small group of actors where the arrests have been made. As you know, in this case, there are many, many witnesses and more than one actor. And so that is something that we are holding on to at this point because of the nature of the ongoing nature of the investigation.
mentioned the case has not been furthered to Queen Creek PD.
Correct.
Given where your prosecutors are at in their review, do you anticipate the case being furthered?
It's too early for me to say that, but what we are doing is if we are running across anything that we feel needs to be tied up, we are communicating that at the time and continuing to review the case because we do appreciate the parents wanting some closure, at least to this aspect of the case.
At this point where your prosecutors are at in their investigation, can you confirm if your office has determined the Lord death to be related in any way to the other teen assaults that are being investigated by other East Valley Police Departments?
At this time, I'm not going to comment on that.
Have you received charging recommendations for any suspects beyond the 7 originally publicized?
In relation to that, no.
In relation to
The Preston Lord homicide, no.
And then one question about the fantastic case from this morning. It seemed like there may have been a disconnect on bond. The state had asked for a $100,000 bond. The judge ultimately granted $25,000, saying they needed evidence to show that this suspect was allegedly connected to the Gilbert Goons. Can you talk about how an affiliation to a group like this can become a challenge when dealing with an initial appearance or bond like what we saw this morning?
Well, as you know, it is the police that are responsible for filling out the Form 4. And while I didn't hear directly the judge's comments, I know about them. And I think it's just a matter of putting more detail as far as the general nature of someone's criminal behavior. Yeah. So I think that's what the judge was getting at with that.
There are likely more suspects to come in that case as seen in photos and videos of the actual assault. Do you anticipate your office communicating with Gilbert Police to ensure they have that evidence of the connection to a group before the next initial appearance?
Well, I'm not going to comment on what all the evidence is or how many people are involved in that. I would refer you to Gilbert, but what I would tell you is that we're already in communication with Gilbert PD.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Of the 600 videos or so that you have in evidence, is there video of the actual attack on Preston Lord?
I'm not going to comment on that.
In terms of the criminal street gang potential, will you or your office release whether or not the alleged Gilbert Goons are considered a criminal street gang before you say whether you are submitting or prosecuting those charges?
That would come at the same time or shortly thereafter. As you know, there are two ways that the street gang comes up. One is as a separate charge, which obviously would be charged at the same time. The other is as an aggravating factor, or I'm sorry, an enhancement, and that would be filed contemporaneously.
So those extra charges, if it was a criminal street gang, you would announce at that same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless, as information becomes available, things could change.
Would there be more information that would become available after announcing Preston Lord, as opposed to the information you already have with evidence that's relating to these teen violence?
From what I hear, every time that there's, significant coverage on this case, that more people do contact the police, which is great. And we're not going to turn off the faucet if there's more information.
Would the number of assaults, if it grows, connected to this group, enhance that it could be deemed a criminal street gang?
It's not just the number of offenses. There's a specific standard by which they have to meet certain criteria before they are considered a criminal street gang. It's just way too early for me to speculate on that.
In the Preston Lord investigation, can you confirm if you're looking at a slew of different charges that these 7 people are facing? Not just one charge, they're all facing the same charge. Is there multiple charges we're looking at?
I don't know how many charges are in a slew, but we are looking at, we have the entire criminal code available to us, and we will file what is appropriate and necessary.
So can you confirm there are multiple different charges that you're looking at right now?
We will consider whatever charges fit the scenario as we develop the information.
In terms of the Gilbert Goons, how is your office working with and around the fact that this is the name that's being thrown around by people in the community? They're using that to look at, hey, these may be linked. Gilbert Police is saying we are now looking at whether these assaults are related to a group called the Gilbert Goons. How do you deal with that from a prosecutorial standpoint in terms of how you address the community who is upset and frustrated and angry at what's going on?
And I understand that that's how people are referring to them. What I'm saying is I don't think it quite captures the seriousness of what we're dealing with here. It really doesn't matter to me what they call themselves or what people call them. What matters to me is what they did and what we can prove that they did. And that's what we're looking at.
I know you're probably going to say I can't tell you this, but with so much public pressure, looking at the workload, the caseload here, and the two homicide prosecutors on it, can you give anybody a tentative timeline as to when there would be some answers?
I can't, like I said, we're working as fast as we can and still doing the thoroughness of the job that we need to do. So it would be, I think, irresponsible for me at this point to just say, oh, it's going to be X number of, weeks or whatever. So I'm not going to do that.
And then my last question, when you do talk about what's going on with the charges and you talk about what you're going to be prosecuting, should we expect a joint press conference between you and Queen Creek Police? Would Gilbert Police also be involved in this? Should we expect something where these departments, these agencies are coming together, or will it be solely your office choosing when to release that info when you're done with the investigation?
That's something so far down the road that we haven't talked about. I mean, obviously we are working together. And so that may be appropriate, but whether that happens or not, I don't know.
Thank you.
Would you mind discussing the prevalence of these swatting calls across the country and here with Mr. Bowers and the state capitol, and just maybe the severity and danger that goes along with that?
Yes, I mean, that's a trend that we're seeing across the country. So swatting is basically lying to the police and telling them that there is an emergency type situation at a certain location, a house or a place of worship. And as you can imagine, the police show up expecting to meet that situation. And of course, it's not happening. That certainly creates a lot of danger for both the police and the individuals that are at that location. It is a crime, and we are actually seeing a trend where it is hitting houses of worship across the country. So we have met with the Anti-Defamation League to hear about that, and we've approached Representative Matt Gress to run legislation that will increase the penalty if it is done to target a house of worship.
One last thing with April, the new charges, new evidence, forgive me if I asked this before, but that dates back to the original situation last fall, not new animals.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, I just want to make sure I got a few numbers right. You said you have a police report that is more than 2,000 pages long.
Correct.
Okay, and then you have more than 2,000 pieces of evidence as well? Or those are the same number?
No, different numbers.
Okay, and 600 of those are videos?
Correct. 600 is within the 2,000.
Great, thank
Yes.
you for that. Okay. Regarding the Fantastic case, can you say why he was the only one of 4 suspects taken into custody by the Gilbert Police, who reportedly cited and released the other 3?
I will refer you to the Gilbert Police for that.
Okay, and then I have one additional question. Does anybody else want to step up while I find it?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Are these on other subjects beyond stuff we've already covered?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I was speaking.
Oh, no, I just have one more question about Preston Lord. So again, about the Preston Lord case, does MCAO feel in any way that Queen Creek submitted the case when they did in order to kind of take the pressure off of them and put the public pressure more on the county attorney's office before the case was ready?
No. I mean, this is an ongoing process, and it was helpful to us that it came to us so that we could review it, even though they are still wrapping up some loose ends. And, I think both Queen Creek and our office are concerned about doing this right. And it's not uncommon to give prosecutors, more notice so that they can start to prepare, especially on complex cases like this.
Okay, thank you.
Have your prosecutors uncovered any problems with the forensic evidence from the Tempe Police Department? And what is your take on the problems with their forensic unit as they pertain to prosecutions?
You know, we did get a memo from them pointing out a few cases where there were some problems identified. What we did with that information is we disclosed it to the defense. Obviously, our prosecutors know about it, the ones who are handling the case. And so we're evaluating the case to see if it stands still with those issues, and we'll act appropriately when we make that determination.
What is your take on it right now? Are you concerned about like a larger amount of cases being impacted, or do you feel like it's kind of being contained and identified? Or?
Well, there were cases that they also identified that were not problematic, so I can't speculate as to the breadth of the issue. What I know is that a lot of times, I mean, certainly you know this from covering, cases don't rest on one single piece of evidence, and so the impact of it, I don't know yet.
Okay, thank you.
Is that
Any
it?
other topics? Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.